If you work as a manufacturing facilities engineer, installing a new piece of equipment can be as complex as the machinery itself. From prep work to alignment and testing, it's your team's job to put it all together. That's why it's good to have Grainger on your side. With industrial-grade products and next-day delivery, Grainger helps ensure you have everything you need close at hand through every step of the installation. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Kick off summer with Memorial Day savings at Lowe's. Right now, get 5 Scott's Naturescapes 1.5 cubic foot mulch bags for just $10. Plus, get up to 40% off select major appliances and save an extra $50 on every $500 you spend on select major appliances $396 or more. Lowe's, we help, you save. Valid through 5/28. Mulch offer excludes Alaska and Hawaii. Selection varies by location. While supplies last. See Lowe's.com for more details.
Blog Talk Radio.
Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to Golf Talk Live. I'm not sure what happened with the audio there, but it was a little bit rusty. But welcome to the show this evening. I thought I'd end it quick. Got a great show for you tonight. Not going to be doing Coach's Corner, but I will be featuring 3 great golf professionals nonetheless. Pete Buchanan, of course, who's been on as a fairly regular guest over the last few years. He's going to be joining me here, and he's brought in 2 other great golf professionals. James Kyle and Buck Mayers is also going to be joining us, and I'll tell you a little bit about them in just a second. But in the meantime, let me remind everybody, of course, we are live every Thursdays from 6 to 8 p.m. Central. We might run a little bit shorter tonight just because we're not going to have the Coach's Corner panel, but nonetheless, we'll have a great discussion. Quickest way to find me is to go to blogtalkradio.com/Golf Talk Live, or just type Golf Talk Live up in the search key. You can also find the show at iTunes.com or Stitcher.com for those of you that like to listen through those platforms. And again, just type in Golf Talk Live up in the search key, and that will take you to the podcast there. For anyone that wants to call in during the live broadcast, you can do so by calling area code 646-716-4667, or you can email any questions or comments to me personally at ted.golftalklive@gmail.com. And, of course, I update the shows on social media. On Facebook, go to Golf Talk Live blog is the main page there, or you can find it on my personal page. And also at my Twitter handle, Ted and Buck CEO, and CEO, of course, is in capital letters. You'll find us there as well, highlights and information on upcoming shows and who my guests are going to be. So make sure you check those out in social media. And if you want to, as I said, if you want to come on the show, if you're interested in being a guest, if you're in the golf profession, whether you're a teacher professional, or maybe you've got a great product out there that's helping many of the golfers improve their scores, by all means, reach out to me at ted.golftalklive@gmail.com, and I'll be more than happy to fit you in the schedule. As I mentioned, I've got 3 great professionals on tonight, and I'm going to read a little bit about each of them, and I'm going to bring them on. We're going to talk about tonight a very interesting topic. We're going to talk about the state of golf instruction today. Lots of great topics within that. And these 3 gentlemen, plus myself, we're going to talk a little bit about each of them. So let me just introduce them, and I will bring all 3 of them here live on the air with me. First up, as I mentioned, Pete Buchanan. He's been on the show many, many times in the past on Coach's Corner and as a special guest. He's the founder and director of instruction and owner of Plain Simple Golf, LLC, which houses the Plain Simple Golf Circuit and Simple Swing Repeater Training Brace. With over 30 years' experience, Pete has been simplifying his golf swing philosophy in an effort to, of course, make it simple for players like you to play this great game. Also, a newcomer to the show, but nonetheless an equally great professional, James T. Kyle. He's a PGA professional and owner of the James Kyle Golf Academy. He was also the 2014 West Central Chapter PGA Teacher of the Year, as well as the 2012 West Central Chapter PGA Junior Golf Leader of the Year. He was also, in 2011, the U.S. Kids Golf Top 50 Teacher Honorable Mention. He's going to be joining us here as well. And rounding up, I guess you could call this kind of a panel tonight, Buck Mayers. He's the Director of Instruction and Co-Chairman, Director of the Texas Wounded Warrior Foundation Golf Tournament, which is held at Escondido Golf and Lake Club. He's also a top 100 club fitter by Ping, co-published the training manual for 3D research and data studies, voted one of America's top instructors by Golf Magazine in 2002, and featured video for Golf Digest with two-time long drive champion Jamie Sadlowski. Also the co-owner and founder of the Downrange Warriors Long Drive team and contributing writer for some great publications, Texas Golfer, Avid Golfer, and On the Links magazine. So without further hesitation, let me bring on all three of these great guys, Pete Buchanan, James Kyle, and Buck Mayers. Gentlemen, welcome to Golf Talk Live.
Thanks, Ted. Good to be here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, no problem. And Buck, I see that you made it in just under the wire, so welcome to you as well.
Thank you, sir. Can you hear me okay?
All right, well, guys, as I mentioned in the opening, up in the opening monologue, we're going to talk about the state of instruction, of golf instruction in today's sort of market or economy. And Pete, I'm going to let you start off, maybe just sort of opening up some dialogue here for this conversation. So, Pete, why don't you just talk about maybe some general points that you want to cover tonight, and then we'll continue the conversation.
You know, I think, Ted, it all got started on this topic when we were just looking overall at, you know, how golf instruction is today. You know, there are certain groups that are saying, you know, lessons are declining. There are some saying it's still the same. We've got several different camps that seem to be going back and forth at each other for we're right, you're right, I'm wrong, you're wrong. And so we just thought we would kind of look at the overall picture and really see, you know, where are we really at, you know, because I know between Buck and James and myself, well, it's not declining for us, but I mean, we're busy, but we just wanted to really lay it out there and just look at the overall picture of the game and really just get a conversation going on not only where the state of it is, but also how do we bridge the gap between all the different camps that are going on, because in the end, we're trying to bring this to the players. And, you know, we don't need to be in a confusing manner and or too scientific or too biomechanical or, you know, too much data. How do we go about looking at the overall picture? Because we know that every area has its basis in the game and every area helps. But how do we look at it from an overall standpoint and get it to where it's the best way to present it for the masses to not only you know, keep them engaged in the game, but also to continue to grow the game and get more people to take lessons and get more people to play golf. So that's really how it started. You know, I talked to Buck and James a little bit, and I thought, hey, it'd be a pretty good idea if we could, you know, do this together and you know, have a conversation. And, you know, I brought it to you, which is great to put it on. So I think it's going to be beneficial for everybody just to get an idea of, you know, different topics that we're going to cover tonight and just, you know, where are we teaching the game today and what's the best way to go about, you know, making it as conducive for those that are receiving it, the players, that we can.
Yeah, Steve, can you hear me? This is Bob.
Yeah, and great way to open up the
go ahead, James.
Yeah, go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, again, appreciate having me on, Ted, and I love your last name, by the way. So I agree with Pete. I think the teachers that are really dedicated to growing the game, and you know, my feeling is that teaching is the lifeblood of growing the game, and I think that we're losing some customers to a lot of the social applications like Topgolf and those type of influences, because it's a fun way for those guys to break out with a little bit of time, maybe a couple hours a week, to, you know, have dinner and drinks and so forth with their friends and family and play a little golf at the same time. And unfortunately, that's kind of dented, in my opinion, the public golf usage of golf courses and so forth. But the serious golfers is growing. I mean, if you look at the state of professional golf, how many professional golf tours do we have now? I think it's like 17. And if you look at the volume of good players we have that are trying to play those tours, you know, it's tremendously tough. I have guys that I teach that are trying to get on the PGA Tour that have to go to Monday qualifiers at web.com events that they got to shoot 63, 64 just to get in. And I feel the same way about the top amateur golf. I feel the same. I mean, I had a kid that won the Big 12 last year that played number 3 on a team at Oklahoma State. So the depth of college golf today is, you know, it's deeper than it's ever been. And also junior golf, if you look at the AJGA and how many different types of tournaments that are around our state in Texas anyway, I think that the tournament that we have in Waco called the Starburst, I think we had 650 to 700 kids this year. So I think it's grown 300% in the last 10 years. So I think the business for the guys that teach a lot, that are dedicated to growing the game, I think we're busier than ever. Unfortunately, I think the millennial culture, not so much. And, you know, I think that's where we struggle.
Going to the gym can be discouraging, especially if you're putting in the work but barely seeing changes. But with Tonal, you can actually see your progress with every workout. Tonal provides the convenience of a full gym and the expertise of a personal trainer anytime at home with one sleek system. Designed to reduce your mental load, Tonal is the ultimate strength training system, helping you focus less on workout planning and more on getting results. No more second-guessing your technique. Tonal gives you real-time coaching cues to dial in your form and help you lift safely and effectively. After a quick assessment, Tonal sets the optimal weight for every move and adjusts in 1-pound increments as you get stronger, so you're always challenged. Tonal lets you choose from a variety of expert-led workouts, from strength to arrow hit to yoga and mobility, to keep you coming back for more. For a limited time, go to Tonal.com to get $500 off your Tonal purchase, plus a free 4-year warranty. That's Tonal.com for $500 off, plus a free 4-year warranty. Tonal.com.
Yeah, and I agree. And James, I want to get you in here as well, and just sort of get your opening thoughts. I imagine you agree with a lot of what both Pete and Buck had just said, but you might have some additional thoughts that you might want to add. So you go ahead, and then we'll get into a little bit more detailed discussions. Okay?
Yeah, I completely agree with Buck. At least in my world here in the Tampa area. I'm actually president of the board of the Greater Tampa Junior Golf Association, and it's kind of my little secret volunteer project that I do behind the scenes. And our association over the last 5 years specifically has grown a ton, probably 25-30% in membership. And, you know, your more elite players like Buck mentioned, that side of golf is busier than ever. Juniors, you know, your older amateur players that are preparing to play in some, you know, state events or USGA events, by all means, that type of golfer is busy. You know, I would say on the retirement level that it seems that those golfers are probably, you know, looking for lessons less than your younger ones. But overall, he's right. Your better players, single digit, they are certainly learning to do the game the most right now.
Yeah, and I agree. I think all three of you made some excellent points to start things off. I think that on the professional level, Buck, as you stated, and James, as you concurred, I don't think there's an issue, and I would agree with you that it's on the increase. But golf as a whole, I think, is on the decline in some areas. And let me point out some of the areas. Obviously, some of our older golfers, for a number of different reasons. Number one, obviously, some of them are getting to the point where maybe their health is impairing them from playing. So they've sort of dropped out. They're not playing as often. And James, as you just pointed out, they're not taking as many lessons, obviously, at this point. They figure, well, this is the game I've got, and I'm going to kind of, play with what I've got here, and there's no point in, I'm 70 years old. There's no point in trying to change a lot at this stage of my life. So from that standpoint, a lot of our much older golfers, the lessons are declining. There's sort of that middle group. And Buck, you had mentioned, let me just back up for a second. Buck, you had mentioned about a lot of the great junior programs out there and that's true for a lot of the programs that are funneling into a more competitive type golf format, whether it be the tours, whether it be college or even high school golf in some markets. But there's the segment of the population where they're not interested in playing on a competitive level other than maybe with their friends or so forth. And they're finding it difficult because the game is not an easy game to learn. It takes time. It takes a lot of patience. It takes a lot of stick-to-itiveness, if you will. And the other thing that it takes
a lot of money.
Besides some money, it takes a lot of money, exactly. But it also it cuts into a lot of your time. And I think one of the areas that golf needs to make a change in is not to just have all of this encompassed 4 to 6 hour rounds of golf. Not everybody can allocate that kind of time or even wants to anymore in that generation, as you pointed out, I think, Buck, about the millennials. So in your opinion, and we'll go through the panel again, if you will, and Pete, I'll come back to you here just to give you a moment. Golf lessons being taken is definitely on the decline. Where do you see it declining? Is it a generational thing? Is it different in each market, do you think? Where are you seeing more often, in your particular experience, where are you seeing some declines? And then James and Buck, I'll let you guys chime in as well. Pete, go ahead.
Well, I think more than anything else, as you just stated, I think in the older generation, I'll call them the more experienced golfers. I shouldn't say the older golfers, more experienced, but they're taking them less as they age. And I think, I look at my kids are 28 and 25, and I look at a lot of those kids who aren't in a competitive situation in golf, and they're just doing other things. I mean, they're not playing much golf. If they are, they'll go to the range with their buddies and beat a few balls, and that's about it. So I think it's kind of the younger generation who's come up with, more activities to do, more electronics, more gadgets to play with. I think, they've gone in different areas. So I think it's, from 25-ish to 35 in that range. I think that's where we're seeing a decline in those that are taking lessons. And so and there's a lot of them. And that's a hard thing to look at because we've got a lot of older members moving out and we don't have a good bunch coming in. And so I think that's where we're seeing a decline, especially at least in my area. That's what I'm seeing. And so I think that's where we're trying to find out, how do we get to them? The Top Golf, as Buck mentioned, has got them because it's an entertainment value, but how do we get them back into golf, back into playing, back into lessons? So that's where I'm seeing it.
Yeah. And right. And before you add your thoughts, James, let me just point out some interesting statistics here very quickly. I had a guest on probably about a month ago who works out in the Phoenix area. He's not a golf professional, but he developed an app to help book tee times and so forth. I won't get into all the specifics right now, but he's been studying many of the member courses out there in the Phoenix area, and he came up with some very interesting statistics. And one of the statistics, he said that roughly about 1% of all, and he's talking about his specific area, of club members are actually playing golf with any sort of regularity. In other words, out of the membership, only 1%, maybe 2% at the most, are playing at least once a week or more. Some are only playing once a month. Some are only playing maybe once a year, possibly in their club championship. That's to me brings up a whole other issue, and we're going to talk a little bit about that as well. But James, I just wanted to point that out first, and then I want to carry that into our conversation here in a moment. But James, your thought, where do you see it declining in your market?
Well, I would agree with Pete completely that, it's that age where the millennials, where they're graduating college, if you will, and, maybe starting their families. I actually have a couple of clients now who have recently rejoined our club because their children are now 10 years old and the children are learning golf from me And because they're learning golf, the families are coming back in. These same families resigned the club 10 years ago when the children were born. So I think there's certainly something, that's occurring from that age, out of college, working, obviously, they don't have enough income to support a club membership, or even, just the ability to go play golf on the weekends. I think that's a big deal until, there's probably some certain age, and I don't know really what the number is, but I'm guessing it's somewhere around 45, 50, where they get to the point where they can actually start playing golf again.
Yeah, and that's a great point as well. I agree with that exactly, as you've just pointed out, James. I think one of the other factors as well is it depends. Years ago when I was growing up, and it may be the same for the three of you, my father took me out to the golf course when I was very young. I started playing with some regularity when I was about 7 years old, but he took me out basically when I was able to stand on my 2 feet. And took me up to the driving range. Of course, I couldn't hit the ball very well, but he introduced me to the game, and there was a certain appeal to it. That's not happening with the same regularity that it once did. Certainly, if golf is in the family, it may continue. But if golf is something that was not traditionally played in, say, your family, then it's not likely a parent or parents are going to take you to the golf course if they've never been really exposed to it at an early age. So that's another issue as well. And I just want to touch on, Buck, I'm going to let you come in here in just a second, but I want to touch on something, James, that you just, talked about, that getting some of the kids coming in now. Maybe you're teaching the parents and some of the kids are coming in now. I'm wondering if maybe the industry needs to take a different approach and really focus on, instead of focusing on juniors and just on women's golf and this, that, and the other, that maybe they have to adopt a different principle and go after the family golf. In other words, more young millennial families, if you will, are wanting to do things together, other activities. Golf is a very individual sport, so a lot of people perceive it that way, whereas maybe if the industry created a forum where it's more family-oriented, that might, and I know some certainly are, but I think there's a lot that's still thinking that individual format. I'll get your thoughts on that in just a moment. But, Buck, go ahead. What about your market? Are you seeing pretty much the same as the other two guys, or maybe something different as far as the decline?
Certainly I agree with Pete and James in their analogy of what's going on with them. And mine is similar. I'm going to go back to what you said earlier. I just kept a couple of notes here, is that, from a time consumption, in today's world with a lot of families with a husband and wife both work and they have kids, I mean, there's just not a lot of time in the day that they can take 5, 6 hours a day, and their weekends are prioritized with, other things that they want to do. And a lot of times it's soccer or baseball or other sports with the kids. So, so that the time factor is huge. And secondly, and you kind of tapped into it, but the cost. I mean, I'm fortunate and blessed that I work at a high-profile club with a lot of people that, money's not an issue, and most of them are retired, and they don't think of those factors. Yet when I go see my buddies and my friends that teach golf in Austin or other cities, communities, San Antonio, and so forth, they see a huge decline just because from a priority standpoint, the family comes first. It takes a lot of time. It's very expensive. And it's very difficult. You talked about how hard a game it is. And if golf is going to grow, the lifeblood to growing the game, in my opinion, has to have some sort of factors that involve teaching to improving. Otherwise, it's not any fun. And golf's meant to be played as a game to have fun. So, as James said, when you're involving the kids, if you get more kids involved, the parents get involved just not by choice, but because they want their kids to be happy. And whatever that takes, if the kids involved, parents get involved, and then there's more activity in the golf programs. Now, from a time consumption, whether it's the first tee programs or some of the other great programs that are out there, there's a lot of 6-hole, 9-hole, 9 wine and dine type things that we do at our club that I think has added on to our membership growing the way that it has. But again, I could get into technology too. I mean, how much time does the average kid, if you knew the stats, you could help me out on this, but I think it's something like 90 to 120 minutes a day that a kid spends on a computer or a phone. I don't remember spending any time inside the house when I was growing up. I guess I'm old, but, you don't see a lot of kids where the parents drop them off at the golf course and they go play 27 holes and, practice on their short game and have lunch and do it again in the afternoon. So, the culture has changed. The environment's changed. I think that those are factors as well. So, but I agree with James and Pete as well.
Yeah, and well said. Thank you. I think that there are certainly a lot of factors involved, technology, and I would say one thing that I would disagree a little bit with what you just said, Buck, and that is on the time that kids are spending on the computer or phone. I think it's actually probably more than 120 minutes a day, at least from some of the kids that I've seen. I don't know. I don't know how they do it. I mean, they're just constant. And one of the dangers that society has now started to realize, and it might seem minor to some, but the coordination of young kids has actually changed from what it was. Unless they specifically get into certain sports, most of the kids that you see out there are not very athletic, and part of the reason is because they're kind of hunched over the computer, or their hands are sort of out in front of them on the phone, typing away, texting and so forth. Their physical development has actually changed. A lot of kids, have very quick thumbs, but some of the other muscles in their body are not as developed athletically as maybe what we might have experienced growing up, because we were out playing a lot of different games, baseball and soccer and football and other things like that, in addition to golf. So there's a lot of things that are lost. And Pete, I want to just jump into an area that I know that you kind of specialize in, and that is the simplicity of the game. Is it lost, do you think that maybe with some of the technology out there, as well intended as it was maybe in the earlier days, it's become too technical in the last maybe 10 years, to the point where it's actually turned people off? It's just too complicated, and it's actually hurt the game a little bit. What are your thoughts on there about simplicity?
Well, to a certain degree, I agree with you there. The technology and the biomechanical movements, the science, the launch monitors, all the different things that are out there have their basis in information, as long as that information can be presented to the student in a simplistic manner. And to me, that's really the catalyst. Yes. Can you keep it simple despite all of the data? Another thing that I think is crucial, and I've talked to James and Buck about this, basic, simple cause and effect. That is not being taught anymore. Teachers aren't being taught what cause and effect is. And to me, that is one of the largest areas, I think, and where instruction has declined. A lot of instruction is motion-based. We're going to move here, we're going to move there, but they're not paying attention to the cause and effect of the impact and how those motions are going to affect what's going on. You have to move this way because our model says you move this way. Well, I can't strike the ball. Well, the model says you move this way. So I think it's gotten lost a little bit in the fact that the cause and effect has declined. I was fortunate, I've told you that before, I got to learn from one of the best cause and effect guys to ever teach the game, in John Jacobs. And, everything was about, what do you want the ball to do? What's the club have to do? What do you have to do to make the club produce that ball flight? And to me, it was always a question of, let's look at the ball, let's look at the impact, let's look at the person, what's going on. Today it's the opposite. Let's look at the person, let's look maybe at the impact, and then lastly, what's the ball doing? I think they've gone backwards, in my opinion. So I think a lot of that decline, I think a lot of the difficulty has come in is that the language that is being used relative to some of the new terms and things that are going on is a little bit more complicated than what I think it should be. And I think a lot of the people are turned off because they just don't understand it. Well justified as it is, those of us that have been in the game teaching it a long time, we understand what's being said, but I think the masses are having a hard time catching on to that. And I think if we keep it the simple cause and effect, and then let those things that are working with, I use the technology. I think it's fabulous, but you have to be able to work it into the scenario in a simplistic manner.
Yeah, well said, and I agree 100% with that, Pete. James, let me ask you something a little bit different here, but sort of on the same lines. I think there's a danger as well, and I might be wrong, but I'm sort of seeing this as potentially not a good thing. I'm all for keeping up with technology. I'm all for, keeping up with some of the new theories that are out there. But I think there's a danger too that, and just from what I've seen, and I see this all the time on social media, everybody, I just got certified in this, and I just got, there seems to be a lot of I guess, instruction or instructors, shall I say, that are continually out trying to up their abilities, and I don't see anything wrong with that. But in order to keep up to the latest and greatest, they're so busy keeping up with those certifications that I don't know how they have time to get out there and actually teach the game. Is there a happy balance that we need to find as instructors, as Pete's just pointing out, maybe keeping it a more simple approach, or do we need to maybe not go for every certification that's out there, but maybe just focus on the ones that we maybe feel are most applicable to our style of teaching? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, that's a great question. There are, I think, actually on one of the forums recently, somebody listed all of the possible certifications that are available, and I think it was in the 20s. And you sit there and you think to yourself, wow, there's 25 certifications available. Well, which one do I do? I'm just, maybe graduating a PGA program, and I want to be a teacher. Where do I go? And there's, as you look at all of them available, personally, I've really never, besides getting involved with Aimpoint, but I don't have any other certifications. I've just kind of, learned by trial and error and listened to my mentors, which I believe I've done well on. But yeah, I mean, with all the certifications, I'm not sure I would say, which ones that I would, if a young pro is asking me, which ones should I do, I probably have a couple in mind that I think are, important to learn from these days. But boy, there's so many of them. I mean, it's confusing even to me, and I've been doing this for a long time.
Yeah, and let me just preface this a little bit or clarify a little bit. I don't want to give the wrong impression, because I know there's a lot of golf professionals that tune into the show, so I don't want to sound like I'm criticizing. But I'm like you, James. I don't get into a lot of this because I think that there's a lot of great certification programs out there. Don't get me wrong, but there's so many out there, and some of them sort of overlap a little bit too, that I think you be forever updating your certifications on a continual basis, that you're really not going to have any opportunity really to be able to keep sort of abreast of everything. So I don't know, again, there's nothing wrong with doing that, but at the same token, there comes a point in time that you have to say, okay, enough's enough. And, as you just point out, there's 20 or 30, in the list. You're forever, looking at other possibilities. Buck, what are your thoughts on that as well? I know that it's something that, that there's nothing wrong with. I'm not trying to criticize about this, but are we making things more difficult in the profession than need be? Do we need to keep things more simple, as Pete pointed out, and as James has alluded to as well? Or what do we need to do to entice more people to want to come out?
Well, first let me say something about Pete and James both, because we have a lot of private messaging that we do in social media. We all three have similar philosophies as far as the state of the game and what's going on between the biomechanics and 3D versus 2D and science and simplicity and so forth. But I want to go back to what Pete said about cause and effect. I think that in today's world, from a marketing standpoint, you see a lot of different instructor programs that are geared towards certifications, toward methodologies, because they think that they've found something unique and different than what we learned when we went through the PGA certification, for instance. I mean, the ball flight laws, the science of that has not changed any. You can't change the root cause of the effect. And I agree with Pete that some of that's lost. That training under someone like John Jacobs, wow, what a lucky guy Pete's been. I trained under Harvey Pinnock, and there's probably no one as simple as Harvey Pinnock was. I was the director of his academy for a couple of years, fortunately, and I took over 100 golf lessons from him. So, that experience was invaluable for me from an art standpoint that, he didn't believe in anything that had to do with video. In fact, when I started using video, he often criticized me for using it. And it took me a long time to gather enough nerve to say, I'm not using it for me. Some people are more visual learners. I'm using it for my customers.
Right.
I can see why they miss it, but they don't necessarily understand. And when you have visual validation, you can't say that it doesn't help. I'll get into 3D versus 2D later, but I don't know. I mean, I kind of get caught in the middle of both of those because I learned under the art. I was a tennis pro before I was a golf pro, so learning the biomechanics of a tennis swing, golf swing, baseball swing, hockey stick, any stick-to-ball sport is not that different. Shaping a golf ball shot is not that difficult for somebody that was a good athlete. Having said that, how many people do we teach that were really good athletes? You made a point earlier about in this generation, how often do you get a blank canvas with someone, that's a great athlete that has no concept of what they're doing? Well, we love that as a teacher, but you get people that, don't really have a very basic understanding of athleticism to stick the ball for it. So, wow, that's a tough question and a good question, and we could talk about this the rest of the hour, but I think from a cause and effect standpoint, I take peaks. I'm a golfer for dummies type mindset, and the first thing I do is screen my customer. I want to make sure that they have the right equipment. I want to make sure that they don't have physical limitations. I want to know how much practice they put into it. I want to know what their goals are. At least I know from a conversation it doesn't take 5 to 10 minutes to screen your client to find out what the right strategy is for that client. Do I start with the clubs? For somebody that doesn't practice, and I know James and Pete do this already, I'm not going to spend any time on the driving range with somebody that just likes to play golf. I'm going to take them on the golf course and teach them how to score. So, Anyway, that's my input to that.
Yeah, and I think also, too, guys, I think that we have to teach to the player and not to the method or the theory, if you will. And I think what was pointed out earlier is that I think that, many of these certifications are sort of following around a specific different theory. And it's certainly interesting to discuss, and it's certainly interesting to ponder. But as you just pointed out, here you've got one of the greatest teachers, Harvey Penick, who has taught some great players in his time, never had access to any technology, never used any technology, just used his for lack of better words, his God-given talents to be able to mold some phenomenal players, and I'm sure teachers as well. So, again, not to discredit technology, but I think sometimes it's taken a lot of instructors down a path that is not beneficial for them. And again, if we're going to teach to the individual, as Buck, I believe you just pointed out, there's visual learners out there as well as audio and so forth. And if the instructor is focusing on one theory or focusing on one specific methodology, then think of all of the people that he or she are sort of phasing out from his teaching if they don't fit into that mold. And that's a danger as well. I think that what we've got to do is keep things as simple as possible, and we've got to teach to the student and not to a theory or methodology. And I think that's what's happened, especially with some of the younger guys that are coming that maybe didn't have the foresight or the ability to learn from some great teachers as John Jacobs and Harvey Penick and many of the other older teachers out there who've had that experience that taught, basically cause and effect, and not through all of these other theories that we're seeing now coming out in the market. Buck, I want to come back to you because you've already opened it up, so let's get into it now. Talk a little bit about 3D and 2D, some of the pros and cons, and then Pete and James, you can jump in as well.
Okay, you're going to put me on the spot here. I'm going to kind of combine
Yep.
I haven't really prepared anything in writing. I just walked off the ring. So, from my whole theory in education comes from myself personally, selfishly, to learn more. It's not necessarily to get any credentials or anything that's going to elevate myself from a status standpoint. I think it just helps me to teach better and become more, as you call, student. The better educated that I am, instead of guessing, I have criteria that I think that I needed to understand better from a cause and effect standpoint by using, 2D and 3D are the difference in an X-ray to a MRI machine, if you will. I didn't like guessing, so I wanted to really know the truth. So you were talking about, myths and fallacies and misunderstanding. There's a lot of rubbish out there that I struggled with as a teacher listening, and I'm not critical of those people because I learn from all different types of instructors, and I think James and Pete and I agree on this, is that I try to take pearls of wisdom from all the teachers that have become before me and after me. So I'm not afraid of learning. At the same time, I think it's important to challenge what you call the simplicity or the art of learning, because it's really not that difficult. I mean, there's only a certain number of influences to why the ball does what it does. It's either the face or the path or the angle of attack, the speed of where you hit it on the face. And if you have a pretty good understanding from the art standpoint, and then you also have the validation, from something that has radar attached for 3D or something like that, because there was misunderstandings, as Pete knows, with John Jacobs' methodology, because a lot of people thought if the ball started left, that the path was left. Well, we now know for sure that more times than not with a better player, that the path is probably more to the right than it is to the left, because they're shutting the face. The rate of closure of that face is so fast because they sense that they're going to hit it dead right, so they shut the face down. So, and I don't want to bore you with the technology aspect of it, but there are some things that we have learned from the data. 2D, for instance, if you're just using a video camera, I mean, now the camera speeds are so good today. I mean, I've used a 3D system now, I think, 9 years. James knows this, but I don't think I told Pete this. I don't even use it anymore. And a lot of people ask me why I don't use 3D anymore. It's because my education, I feel like I spent 7 years writing a journal on 3D data, that I can use that education, that information, to transition into a simplistic approach to all my students because I understand it better than I did before, if that makes sense. So anyway, I think that does help us to simplify the approach or the strategy, if you will, because I love teaching beginners as much as I like teaching tour players. And everybody asks me that question. I had one today. Is it easier to teach a beginner or a tour player? Well, the tour player is harder because the concepts are different and their attitudes are different and their concepts have a certain criteria that you have to meet. And there's only so much you can change anyway with somebody that's been doing it for 20 years. I think Pete and James would agree. If you give somebody a blank canvas with somebody and you're starting from scratch, it's a much easier approach. And they're hungry for information too. So those are as much fun for me just to help somebody get the ball up in the air. And you better be as simple as you can be to help them get better each week. They're not coming back.
Right.
Yeah, and that's I would agree with that, Buck, with what you said. Just here at the end, particularly, I think that we have to, when you're working with somebody especially new, it can be very intimidating to a lot of people that have never picked up a golf club before. They don't know what to expect. I know for a fact many women particularly are very uncomfortable because they're not sure what impacting the ground is going to do. They're afraid that they're going to hurt themselves, so they don't understand that sensation. And I think that you have to kind of really take it a very simplistic approach, I believe, as well, when you're working with newer students particularly, because they don't understand everything that's going on. And Pete, I know this is something that we've talked about before on the show. I want to get both yours and James. Pete, I'll let you go first, and James on what Buck just said about 3D and 2D. Your thoughts on that, some of the pros and cons that you've discovered in your own teaching, and what some of the students can benefit from either one.
Well, I'm probably the one that has the least amount of work with 3D. I mean, I did some of it with Dr. Maxwell, who's a TPI guy, a medical advisor. There definitely is some value to it because I in my conversations with Buck, I think in looking at 3D, it just validated what we already knew. But I think in some cases, there were particular things we thought were happening that actually weren't happening. It was a little bit different. So it was just more validation than anything else on what was going on. And a little bit back to the ball flight laws. I mean, I'm gonna defend John Jacobs a little bit here in the ball flight laws, because in conversations with John, when you had the chance to talk to him, he talked about a lot of what he called ball flight foolers. And it's right in line with what these machines are telling us today. He knew it. He knew that the face was going to be more influential in certain different instances. But he had a basic outline that he used. So I want to defend him a little bit because, I had a lot of people have the benefit of being able to stand there and talk with him, which we were able to do. So he was definitely ahead of a time and a very keen and very sharp individual. So I just wanted to take the bull by the horns and having worked for the schools for a long time to defend him. But I think in a 2D versus 3D, Buck mentioned that the cameras are so good today. I mean, you can see a lot of what's going on. I know for me, and when you're going back and talking about certifications and certain models, I know when I went through some 3D work, they had a model of positions you had to get into, and I got to tell you, I couldn't do it. I couldn't get into the positions they wanted me to get in. My body doesn't bend like that. So, I went through the whole gamut, and I got a big, huge F. I failed on every aspect of where I was supposed to be relative to the model. In my model has always been impact. That's the model I use. I base everything I do off the club and the ball's contact. I don't have a swing model. I developed a swing based on what I thought was the simplest way to get the impact correct. But I've always used impact as the model. So, I'm probably one on a 2D, 3D. I'm more 2D oriented, but I have worked some on it. But I'm going to bend Buck his ear one of these days on getting some more info on what he's found out, because I think it's like him. I'm interested to find out what more 3D has to offer.
So, Pete, forgive me on the Jacobs.
Well said.
Yeah, I stand corrected.
Oh no, I mean, I wasn't meant that way, Buck. I mean, it's happened a lot, and everybody says he was totally wrong, and I beg to differ. He wasn't, because we've talked about it. I mean, he knew. I watched a guy hitting straight pulls with an 8-iron, ball after ball after ball after ball with straight left. And he asked me, he says, "What's going on?" I said, "Well, this guy's, basically in out with a face shot." And he goes, "What gave it away?" I said, "The angle of attack. This guy hasn't taken a divot in his entire life. If he was actually out to end, he'd be taking a huge root canal over there. So, there'd be a big divot involved." So, I mean, he knew it was there. But from a basic, standpoint, we talked the basics, and then obviously we went from there. But, it's a little bit of if you had the chance to work and know John, there's just more to him than what some just like to spit out there for, not you, Buck, but I mean, so they keep telling him, "Oh, he had it totally wrong." Well, he didn't. He just didn't. So anyway, that's my on John.
I agree with you, Pete. Yeah, I agree with you, Pete, on that. James, 2D and 3D, there's, as we've just heard, there's lots of discussion on that. From your student standpoint, what benefits are they deriving from using that technology? What are they? Obviously, not everybody's a visual person, but obviously it helps you to be able to articulate, as it was pointed out earlier with many of your students, as to what's actually going on, and explain to them, here's some of the areas that you need to work on, and you can discuss it through video and other options in that. What is some of the feedback that you're hearing from your students when you formulate either a 3D or 2D approach?
Certainly, Ted. For me, I do not own a 3D monitor system. I have studied it. probably, for about the last 2 years. Some of the guys that have 3D, and obviously I have spoke privately with like Buck and a couple of the other, real popular teachers that have 3D. For me, and like Pete just said, he said it perfectly, learning about it, even though I don't actively use it, really helped to validate some of the things that I always felt were happening. So that's really, and like Buck said, the education of it really helped to kind of, in a way, things that I was questioning on my own as a teacher, that I felt, okay, I'm doing this correctly. And as far as 2D is concerned, I do video on my iPad and my iPhone every day. I bet I snap 100 videos a day, 5 days a week. And I don't do it with everybody. I kind of use it where I feel like I should be using it. There's some clients that really don't want to see it. But at the end of the day, there's that saying, feel versus real. So that's usually whenever I use it the most is if my client is feeling like they're doing the right thing. And so, I don't necessarily even show the entire video from beginning to end. I might stop it and just kind of show them, well, here's what we're working on. You can see that you haven't actually accomplished it yet. And so that's what I do. And for me, I do, like I said, a lot of video, but I actually spend half of my time on the course in playing lessons every week. So I only, I'm 20 hours a week on the range and 20 hours a week on the course. So even on the course, because now we're in real action, I do video a lot out there because, again, where they're poorly aligned, which is just about the number one thing that occurs when something's wrong on the course, and they just don't realize it. So using the video while they're in action really helps to clear things up and, improve their progress for sure.
Yeah, and I like, and I agree with all of you. I think that, the video speaks volumes. I think that there can be a lot learned both from the teacher's standpoint and certainly from the students. Having that technology in hand and using it can be very, very beneficial for assessing some potential problems that the students may be having, and then also being able to reinforce them using that technology that's available. And you're right, as you've all pointed out, the technology today with video capture and things like that is just so phenomenal. Even on some of the basic phones now that you have out there or tablets, the quality of video is just incredible. And so you get to see basically every nuance of the golf swing in very clear and precise visual effects. So certainly a benefit, I think, for all teaching professionals to have access. Whether you want to go to the level of a 3D or not is, I think, up to an individual. Some may prefer it and want to go that route, and some may just be satisfied with the traditional 2D video. I want to ask you guys something as a group, and whoever wants to chime in first, by all means. One of the things that I had to, Pete, I know you'll know him off the cuff here, but I had a guest on. He's been on many, many times on the Coach's Corner, and he was a guest here recently, Clint Wright, one of the greats. He's from out in South Carolina, and very, very, very smart when it comes, particularly with the short game. And what he's been doing here lately is actually giving some short game, or as he calls them, the third shot clinics, where he'll bring his students in and give them some stats. And some of the interesting stats, I'll just give you a couple here that he's gathered over the years, and that's been proven scientifically. But roughly 43%, depending on who does the stats, is on the putting surface of your shots per round. Probably less than 14% is in the long game, and then the rest fall into the other areas of the short game. So my question to the three of you is, if over 50, if not 60, maybe 70% plus of all the shots taken in a round of golf are on the short game, and on the putting surface, why is so much emphasis being put on the golf swing? Anyone want to jump in first?
I'll do it. I think they, to a certain extent, they go hand in hand. I know for a lot, I'll do a lot of pitching work because it's a great benefit for the full swing. But I think one of the reasons why a lot of the full swing is being taught is there's another aspect of golf that's big right now is how far can we mash it down the fairway? How long can you hit it? Distance, long, hit it far. And I think that's a big emphasis. A 325-yard drive counts the same as a 4-foot putt. I mean, if you make it, it's still one. But I think you're right. There's a large percentage of the game that is under 100 yards. I have a tracking system that I use, a scorecard per se. I think James has had a chance to look at it, and it tracks every shot that you take and shows you from tee to green where you are, and gives you a pretty good reading as to where your shots are failing when you're trying to score and where they're coming from. And for the most part, you see it takes a 5 or 6 on a hole, and he'll say, well, if I could just drive it better, I'd be fine. Well, you were in the fairway, and you still made a 7. So, it's not necessarily coming from that area. But, yeah, I think there's a big emphasis on hitting it a long ways, and I think that's why, obviously we're still working on the swing. The swing's always going to be a part of it, especially with some players. They don't have a lot of speed, so basically every shot they hit is a full one except, from 50 yards. They're taking a pretty good whack at it to get it to go. So we still have to work on, the full motion of what's going on. But I think in that regard, you're going to find that it's beneficial to leading into helping some of the other shots with the full swing motion. They go hand in hand. So, I don't know if I totally answered your question, but I went first. So there you go.
I'll go second.
Yeah, no, that was great. That was great, Pete. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I always ask, especially the young players, whenever I start working with them, and even after a few lessons, you ask them, all right, what do you want the ball to do? And everybody, the first answer is, I want it to go far. No matter, that is the number one answer. And, there's lots of the players that are older that do come to take lessons. They are always, their first response is, whenever you ask them, what are you looking for? Well, I'm losing distance. So no one ever comes to me for my putting lessons first, even though I have lots of great stuff about putting. It's all about how good they're hitting it, or they're not hitting it solid, and they want it to go farther. And that includes, some of the clients that show up that are 80 years old. And even though their driver is only going 150 yards, they want to know if I can get them to 175, because that's where their buddies are in the group. And, so everybody wants it to go far. They want to do that before they get to the green, for sure.
Yeah, and that's, I think, part of the problem that the industry faces is, and Pete, I know we've talked about this many, many times on the show over the years, there's been a big marketing effort by the golf industry to, grip it and rip it, if you will, especially since players like John Daly and Bubba Watts and others come on there that can just belt it a mile. There's been a big emphasis by the manufacturers of equipment and by the industry as a whole to just, be able to mash it down the fairway. But I think, Buck, and I want to get your thoughts on this as well, I think that we as professionals have to, obviously first and foremost, we have to ask our students why they want to play golf. Why are they there in the first place? Are they, interested in playing competitive golf? Are they just out to have a good time? Whatever their reasons for playing first and foremost. But then the second question is, what's more important, scoring well or having a picture-perfect swing and hitting pretty shots on the driving range? I think we have to differentiate the two and decide as a player what it is they want most, and then build the lesson tee, if you will, around their answer. If they just want to be able to hit it 300 yards down, then there's no point in even moving over to the practice tee or over to the practice green or the bunkers, greenside bunkers, and working on that part of the game, because that's not what the student wants. And I I would challenge most people out there that ultimately they want to be able to score well. Certainly they want to be able to hit good shots, but they want to score well. So if we're spending or allowing them to spend most of their time out on the lesson tee learning how to hit the ball in such a way to hit it further down the fairway, if that represents a small percentage of their game, then we're really doing them, I think, a disservice, because they're not going to improve as the stats will show you. This is why handicaps have not gone down, because everybody, and I'm not saying this as an instructor, but I'm talking about the players themselves, are focusing on hitting perfect shots and hitting it further and not focusing on the areas of the game that are actually going to help improve their score. So I think in our assessments, I think we need to ask them what's most important to them. And I'm sure most instructors are doing that, but for some reason it's not happening. So Buck, I want you to jump in here as well. I'm sure you get a lot of the same feedback from your students. You know, I want to be able to hit it further, I want to obviously be able to hit it straighter. Are we asking them, or should we be asking them, how important is score to you?
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head as far as the screening process. I think in the analogy by Pete and James were outstanding. If you don't screen the player, my perspective is that what they say they do and what they really do can be very different. So if you took a player and you screened them and you asked them all the right questions, and you said the first hour and a half that I'm going to spend with you is actually watching you play the game, I think the teacher would have a better perspective of what the strategy should be if they really want to score better. You can figure that out in three holes. So that's where I start. I screen them first. I take them on the golf course. And I agree with James 100%. I spend at least 60% of the time with my players on the golf course, and probably 30% in the short game area, and then 10% on the driving range. And I also want to say something you said earlier about stats. Stats can be terribly misleading. I traveled out on the tour for probably 3 to 4 years. If you look at the putting stats for the top 3 players in the world, where do you think they stack up in putting? You'd be incredibly surprised. And if you look at their ball striking, you know, since Jason Day, I think, is not in the top 100 in putting, but he's number 1 in scrambling. Number 2, Jordan Spieth, who I'm friends with, he trained at our studio at Motion Sports Dallas, is not what I would consider a great ball striker, but he's a good ball striker. He's adequate enough to get it around the golf course, but he's really good at getting the golf ball in the hole. I mean, if you look at Tiger, when he struggled, when he changed coaches, every time he changed coaches, 4 times in the last 15 years? And for a year and a half, everybody thought he was in a, right? So if you take one of the best players of all time and they struggle in their methodology change, if you go back to what got them to be the best was getting the ball in the hole. When Tiger played by art, I don't think anybody could argue with this. Butch Harmon's probably one of the best coaches out there to get the most out of their players without making too many changes. You know, when Tiger won the Masters by 12, Tiger said, Butch, we got a lot of work to do. We got a lot of changes to make. I mean, I was there and heard the conversation, you know, secondhand. But the point I'm making is, Butch said, wait a minute, you just won the Masters by 12 shots. We may need to make some minor adjustments and tweaks to the things that you're doing, but there's no major overhaul that's going to happen here. It's just not. And then I think, you know, in time, Tiger felt like that he could make some mechanical changes that he thought was going to improve his golf game. So he went to Hank Haney. I'm just using this as an example. And what happened?
Sure.
For a while, he struggled, right? And then, you know, he changed to, Sean Foley. Happened. And then he goes to Chris Como. Same thing happened. But, you know, if you get away from the art of how you learn to play when he was with his dad, I think that was one of the downfalls in his life, too. We won't get into his personal life. But, you know, when you get into changing those methodologies of how you actually learn to get the ball in the hole, it changes the dynamic of what made you great. And I think that that's lost, as James and Pete both said. I think there's so many myths and fallacies and misunderstandings. That sludge is so apparent today. I mean, I had a conversation with Bill Harmon, Butch's brother, this morning, because he posts a lot of things on social media. And he's just gone through cancer treatments. He's not as healthy as he was. He's not as fit as he was. And I'm listening to his trials and tribulations and struggles of changes that he's trying to make in methodology, and he works with two of the best players out there, Bill and Jay Haas. And so it's not that Bill doesn't know what he's doing. My observation is that he has so many physical limitations in his ability, mobility, stability, strength, and so forth, to make those changes that it's not possible. So if you don't change the function first or find the root cause of the effect first, you're not going to change your golf swing. It's apparent that that's not worked over time. The players that have kept their coaches the longest, Rory McIlroy, Jordan Spieth, and so forth, those guys pretty much stay on the same track consistently, and they may make small adjustments to what they do, but they don't make major overhauls because it's not needed. And I think more times than not, I've seen so many great players that have changed coaches and have failed. I mean, I know Pete and James know who Sam Randolph is, and one of the best amateur players of all time. It was on the cover of Golf World saying can't miss pro, right? I think he won the Zurich Open his first year, and I don't think he made a cut for 3 years. I don't think he stayed on tour for 4 years.
Right.
And I won't say the instructor's name, but I think when you try to change what got you where you are because of some methodology or because some named instructor says this is what you need to do to become a better player, it ruins your instincts, your intuitive ways to play the game. And I think that's ruined golf in some respects. I think that 3D, I won't get into the name of the group, but I get into arguments on social media. James knows this for a fact, because there's a lot of different philosophies and methodologies that have hurt people in the game in time because they're trying to put them in a model, and there's no such model. There's some commonality to what good players do, but there's differences. And I learned that from 3D. If you put Sergio Garcia and Greg Norman next to each other in a 3D capture, and there's 9,000 variables in that 3D, there's probably 70% of them that are different. It's just a fact. They just are. Now, that other 30% is what those top 50 golfers in the world do. And Pete knows that because I've read enough and watched what Pete does and says, my parameters of cause and effect are A, B, C. They're that simple. And I think that James and I kind of admire that simplicity to helping my students get better faster. And so that's my perspective on that.
Well, what a great segue into the mental side of golf, Buck. Thank you for that. That was fantastic. And you're exactly right. And again, this is not to criticize any of some of the great instructors out there, what you just said, because, they've all got their own individual approaches to the game. But you're exactly right. Tiger is probably one of the best examples in more recent times. I mean, here he was a young kid, developed his golf swing, had some early coaches besides his dad early on in his career before he got out on the PGA Tour. Obviously got connected with Butch Harmon and, just went out there and racked up the wins. And I think what happens, and I could be wrong, I'm certainly only guessing here because I'm not in Tiger's mind, but I think what happens is, much like so many others, Ian Baker Finch comes to mind. Ian Baker Finch, started off with really a great career and ended up getting away from golf and now is an announcer, not because he wasn't a good golfer, but sometimes I think at that level they get caught up in the pursuit of perfection. And when they're unable to find that, they move on to somebody else that they think, well, okay, maybe this will be the magic, elixir or sauce, if you will, to get me to that, that perfect swing I want. And ultimately what ends up happening is it has the opposite effect. They get too technical. They get, even Nick Faldo, obviously struggled very early on in his career, got connected with David Ledbetter, went out there and rebuilt his entire swing, went on to win 6 major championships and a slew of others. But then they parted and he tried to do other things. And, his game sort of certainly still a great ball striker, but it just sort of fizzled out. Now he's in the announcer's booth. And again, I'm not criticizing him, but I think that there's a pursuit of perfection at that level. And I think from a mental standpoint, that's not a good thing. So James, I'm going to let you go first this time and start the conversation on mental golf. There's a lot of variables, there's a lot of things, a lot of areas that we can talk about, but I'm going to let you start the conversation. How do we get into the minds of our golfers out there and help them sort of get a game plan in their head first before they actually get out in the golf course?
Well, this is a good one. For me, I find that every new student I meet, and then even beyond that, the ones that I work with every week, that there's this time period where the student coaches themselves, even whenever I'm standing there. And, you know, I may have a hard time describing this, but do the best I can. Yeah, so there's lots of players that show up, and they have been, you know, learning golf maybe on YouTube, or they've read magazines every month or watched the Golf Channel, and they have all of these little things in their minds about what they should be doing to hit the ball good. And I would say that there's so much information, and I'm not saying that all the information is necessarily wrong. It's just that each player has so much information in their mind that they even have trouble pulling the trigger to even make a swing on the way back. And they have all these little steps that they're processing just before they even take the club away. You know, my grip pressure, I got to keep my right hand soft and my left hand firm, and then I have to tuck my elbow, and then I have to keep my head down. I got to keep my eye on the ball. And then so many of them are like, yeah, well, I'm actually trying to look at the back of the ball, or I'm trying to look at the inside of the ball. And so what I'm getting at is there's so many things that they're attempting to do that they can't even make a fluid swing, you know, from beginning to the end. And hopefully that makes sense. But I actually see that as probably the number one issue.
Yeah, they're
in their own minds. They are technically in their own.
Yeah, they're
way,
overthinking the process
to make a swing. That's right. Way too many processes going on. And then so what I do is I ask them what they're trying to do. It's part of my interviewing, and as soon as I hear, you know, 5, 10, 15 things as the lesson is going on, I try to pay a lot of attention. As soon as I hear something that's ridiculous, I let them know, okay, we got to take that one off the list. Because it's amazing whenever you actually get them to stop doing most of those things and just let them swing. They actually hit the ball great, and the lesson's over, and we're happy. So that's kind of what I see the most.
Right. Buck, what about you? From the mental side of things, what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I mentor with Dr. David Cook, who wrote the book 7 Days at the Links of Utopia, Golf Sacred Journey. So he's my favorite. But I love Ian Nielsen and Lynn Marriott, Bob Rotella, Jensen Koop, Michael Hebron. There's so many of those guys that I follow because I think the game mentally and physically go hand in hand. And I think great golf coaches like James and Pete know this, that you know, if you're going to perform under pressure, I have 3 rules that I use with all of my clients, and I'll just tell you what they are. It's pretty simple. You know, how do I get my customer, my client, my student to become comfortable at being uncomfortable? Because it's going to happen. When you walk from the range to the first tee and you can barely put the ball on the peg, what are you feeling? What are you thinking? What are you seeing? I think they lose sight of the task. You know, which is really, in my mind, a reaction to the target. So I put a lot of my students in very uncomfortable situations on the golf course, and I challenge them, and I compete with them. And I think that's an important thing, too. I have to be able to structure my lessons in a way that I can perform the task just like that I want to coach them in. So I practice that myself. The other thing is how do you prep and calm your nerves under the gun? Because that's equally as important because your adrenaline's up, your breathing shuts down, your heart rate goes up. And what do you do to calm that? So teaching people how to breathe, I don't know if you guys do yoga or not, but I try to get my students to understand more about how to breathe. And third, let your eyes tell you the story. You can't smell it, taste it, hear it, but you can see it. And Mr. Pinnock kind of taught me this a long time ago. Take dead aim. That sounds very simplistic, but yet it's very complicated. How do you actually internalize the see, feel, trust mode of believing and have confidence that you've hit that shot? I used to spend a lot of time around Fred Couples, and he used to say, you've hit a perfect shot with every club in your bag. How good is your recall? And I thought about that for a minute because as a tennis pro, I could remember vividly under the gun playing John McEnroe in a United States Tennis Association junior championship that I won that match, and it was all about recall. I was able to remember exactly the spot that I hit that ace in the ad court under the gun at 6-6 in a tiebreaker. And I think the players that are in the top of their echelon, their recall is so good because they're so task-oriented that they're in their own little bubble. I mean, if you watch the greatest players of all time, whether it's Nicklaus or Hogan or any of those players under the gun, if you watch their eyes, I guess I'm older than most of you guys, but if you remember Ray Floyd, every time I watched his pre-shot routine, I had the feeling that whatever he thought that ball was going to do, he was going to do it. I mean, he was going to will that shot to be exactly the way that he saw it. So anyway, those are my 3 rules, and I keep it as simple as I can. But I encourage all my students to work with mental game coaches because I think that it helps, because it gives a formula that's easily understood. I love coaches that spend all of their time with my players on the course. I'm not a big fan of couch coaches. Like James and Pete, I think we all spend more of our time watching what they do under pressure because that really tells the story.
Yeah, and Pete, before I get you to jump in, I just want to add something to that. You're exactly right on that point, Buck. I think that observing what the students do, how they handle themselves on the golf course as opposed to out on the lesson tee, can give you a wealth of information. Anybody can hit good shots on the practice range under ideal or perfect conditions. But out on the golf course, when pressure's mounting, especially a novice player coming up to the first tee, a lot of nerves come into effect. They're not sure what to focus on, and suddenly a million ideas start coming in. Well, I've got to have my grip this way, and I've got to make sure I'm aiming this way, and all that data starts feeling in, and the tension builds, and then ultimately, more often than not, unless they're a more seasoned player, they're not getting off to a very good start. And that's why you often hear many amateur players say, well, it takes me about 3 or 4 holes to get warmed up. And that's because they haven't sort of gotten or grooved into that mental pattern yet. So, Pete, I know you like to keep things simple. What do you do to help your students, and what should we, as a general rule, maybe in golf instruction, should we be doing to help our students to sort of overcome some of these mental barriers that they often come into?
Well, you know me in simplicity, so I'll give you a scenario because it happened recently. So we're on the driving range warming up before we're going to play. So I have this particular gentleman, and he finishes by hitting 6 drivers. 3 went left, 3 went right, 2 topped along the ground, and the other 4 I don't think found the range. So we go over to the first tee, and now the pressure's building. And he walks up there and he steps up and he's got that driver in his hand. And I said, all right, let's think about this for just a minute. Over there on the range, when you were relaxed, what happened? I said, how many balls went necessarily towards the fairway? And he said, none. And I said, well, let's think about pulling something else out here to hit off this first tee so we can get started. Let's get started putting the ball in play first with something we know we can hit. Obviously, this driver's not working. We just found the evidence of it over there, so let's just put that away for a while, and let's get something else out of your bag. So that, to me, it's a little bit of course strategy, but it's also the mental side. Hold on a minute. I always told the people when I was doing mental golf with the Jacob schools, I said, look, I always ended up hitting drivers only so I could see if I could use it. That was my last thing on the range. I'd warm up hitting drivers just to see if I could find the fairway. And if I wasn't finding the fairway on the range, there's no way in, God's green earth I'm going to find it when I'm nervous on the first tee. So I better find something I can put in play.
Right.
So I think it goes back to where you were talking about getting them started, getting them off the course, getting them going, and making them, begin to play. I know the first hole of the course I grew up at, if you hit driver, you had a a less than a full wedge, and I hated that right off the bat, having to hit the manufacturer shot. So I never hit a driver off the first hole. I always hit an iron so I could hit a full shot into the green. And people didn't understand that. And I said, well, I'm not ready to hit a pitch yet. Not yet. I'm not comfortable on the course yet. So let me get comfortable, then maybe I'll go for that shot. It wasn't one of my strengths. So I always try to look at it from an overall visual standpoint of, let's look at what we're trying to do here based on what you just came from. And then on the other side of the coin, I think it changes when you have different levels of players, and a little bit on the mental side, and it kind of goes back to just a point I wanted to go back to. I always tell my players, I said, look, what we're going to work on, I'm going to teach you how to strike the ball better, but you already know how to play. All I'm going to do is make your shots better. But you haven't forgotten how to play golf. You already knew how to play before I came along. I don't want you to lose sight of being able to play the game. I'm just going to help you to strike it better for what you want to do. So I don't want to get caught up in all the details of what the swing's doing. We're going to make some adjustments to make the ball flight better, make it more consistent, make it fly better. But don't let that overtake your ability to play the game because you know how to play. You're already at a pretty good level. I'm just going to enhance it. So a little bit on that piece of it as well.
Yeah, I think, guys, to sort of sum this part up, I think really from a mental standpoint in the game, there's really a number of areas that you can draw from. First and foremost, I think if you're confident in your ability, number one, as a ball striker, obviously that's going to give you a certain element of confidence that mentally is going to help you navigate around the course. And if you work on those fundamentals, Jack Nicklaus, for instance, talked about in Golf My Way, he talked about how, at the beginning of each season, he went out and he worked over all of the fundamentals from start to finish. Every year he started out, obviously the seasons weren't quite as long as what they are now. So in his downtime, he didn't play a lot of golf as much as what you might think. He was out doing other things. But when he was getting ready and fired up again for a new season, he went out and he worked on the fundamentals to sort of, Buck, I believe it was you that talked about sort of that recall. He wanted to be able to recall, some of those abilities that he was going to need throughout the upcoming year. So he went out and he worked on those fundamentals. He didn't go into a lot of swing changes. He knew what worked for his game. He knew and that's why, he was arguably, if not one of the strongest mental game players that has ever lived to this point. And obviously Tiger fell into that as well. And the reason was he didn't try to make a lot of changes. He didn't try. In fact, I think it was only once in his career where he did go to a different instructor, tried to make some changes, and had certainly not success. So he went back to what he knew, Buck, which goes back to a point you mentioned earlier about Tiger. But I think from a mental standpoint, when you're comfortable with your golf game, that can alleviate a lot of the pressure. I think the other thing is not to allow yourself to get too technical on the golf course. Think about the shot, one shot at a time. Don't think about 5 shots down the road or 5 holes down the road. Think about the shot that you're immediately faced with and work on that and execute the shot. And then once that shot's over, then you deal with whatever circumstances. If you've hit a great shot and you're out in the middle of the fairway, excellent. If you're in the first cut of rough or maybe a little further in, then you work on the next shot. And I think what happens with a lot of players is they're thinking back to all the bad shots they hit. They get up there, the anxiety builds up, and they're just not able to put those steps in place and inevitably end up, derailing their game before it even gets started. I think lastly, because we're getting close to end of our time here, let's talk about a little bit about the equipment side of things, about the importance of being fitted properly. Buck, do you want to start that as well? And then the other guys, if they want to add some thoughts to it as well. Obviously, being fitted properly for their clubs is extremely important. Tell us a little bit about the process there.
Yeah, I think the club fitting is one of the most neglected parts of the screening process. I mean, I see swing flaws often is from a cause and effect standpoint because, the club is too long or too heavy or too stiff or too light, whatever it may be, grip size. I mean, there's so many influences getting the right club fitting. And I think there's a lot of misunderstandings out there from a fitting standpoint. I think that James and Pete would both agree that if you're a serious golfer, there's not anybody out there that doesn't go to a good club fitter. And I travel on the tour, and those guys have the luxury of having engineers and professional club fitters out there, on a weekly basis. I mean, the average Joe doesn't have that luxury. But a lot of them have the feeling that because they're not very good, they don't need to be fitted. And that's the worst strategy that you could possibly have. They need to be fitted more than a professional, because a professional can change something that they do to accommodate the club. I really, in my screening process, that's one of the first things I do. I evaluate every club in their bag. I make sure that they're fitted correctly. Now, not everybody can afford $2,000 or $3,000 worth of clubs. So I spend a lot of my time bargaining and trading and looking on eBay and helping kids. I have a scholarship fund that I help with kids that can't afford new equipment, that gets them fitted and put them in equipment that is the right for them, so it's easier. I think that there's not anything better that I can say is that if you're a golfer, you need to be fitted first. Otherwise, your swing is going to be terrible from the positioning of, if you get a club that's too light, for instance, to a pretty fast player, Pete and James will tell you this, that they're going to try to slow the swing down to start the ball on their line and then manipulate the face at the bottom. Now, somebody that's a novice golfer that plays with somebody's clubs, they're hand-me-downs from their husband that they cut down, that's a stiff shaft that's 2 inches shorter, that has no kick in the club at all, they're going to labor. They're going to have trouble putting the face of the club on the ball. So I spend a lot of time. I worked with King today. We had a club fitting today with probably 15 to 20 customers. And by the way, I don't know if James and Pete saw this. I'm doing a little test this weekend with my lawn drive guys with old technology. I'm taking 43-inch X100 persimmon head 9-degree clubs with a lot of balls. I'm doing a test with my lawn drive guys that swing at 140 to 150 miles an hour, just to see the difference in what the technology tells me. Because they're playing with 4 or 5 degree lofts with double X shafts that are 48 inches long and club head speeds that are higher. Yet, if you look at some of the old school guys, Nicholas won the long drive contest, I think it was in 63 or 64 at 367 yards.
Yep.
43-inch steel shafted driver, 9-degree persimmon head with a Bellata ball, by the way. So the equipment has changed the mindset dramatically, in my opinion, of how you play. Pete made a statement earlier about distance today. I mean, those guys don't worry about hitting the middle of the face because they can get away with hitting as hard as they can and miss hitting it a little bit and still keep it where they can find it. The old school guys back then, they had to hit it on the button. I mean, their sweet spot was a nickel. And today it's about the size of a silver dollar. So that's why I don't think that you see as many great golf swings today as you did in the old days. That's just my opinion.
That's a good point.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, Buck. You're exactly right, because when you look at a lot of the older players, the Nicklases, the Palmers, the Trevinos, and so on, a lot of them, if you look at them by today's standards, certainly were not picture perfect swings, but they were able to execute. Billy Casper, another one. All great ball strikers, all were able to close the deal, if you will, out in the golf course, and won multiple tournaments, as well as many majors throughout the group. And they didn't have the benefit of today's technology, and it would be an interesting test. I want to hear some more about the results of this challenge that you're going to do on the weekend, Buck. I would love to hear more about it. If you don't have it, I'll get Pete to give you my email, and I'd like to find out where I can tune in or find out where more information about that. I think it would be very interesting to see how some of these long drive guys do with some of the older type of equipment. So it'd be very interesting to find out. James, any thoughts that you want to add in about club fitting or that end of it?
I mean, honestly, I totally agree with Buck. I do a lot of club fitting, and it's one of the first things I do the first day, or if not the second day. evaluating their equipment. Just about everybody shows up with equipment that is not fit for them, and once in a while, players show up with new clubs that, even after a handful of lessons, even the new clubs that they've gone and just bought maybe off the rack turn out to be not a good investment. So yeah, I always try to head them off at the beginning and make sure that they're not spending the wrong money. Try to help them myself, with my equipment, and so that they're happy and their clubs last them a long time for sure.
Yeah, and well said. I think that the key is, I think, not everybody, as you pointed out, I believe, Buck, you pointed out earlier about, spending $2,000-$3,000 on a new set of clubs. You don't have to spend a lot of money on golf clubs, but you do have to make sure that you're fitted properly for whatever set it is that you get. And I think that's more important. And then as you become a better player and your financial circumstances change and you want to reward yourself a little bit down the road, then you can maybe upgrade to maybe a more expensive set. But I think what a lot of people do is they go out, they spend a lot of money on golf clubs that maybe they don't get fitted well for whatever reason, and struggle and suffer out in the golf course, and then learn to hate the game even more because they're not getting the best use out of the equipment that they've got, and they've spent a small fortune doing it. So I'm for spending less but being fitted well and learning to play the game and advance that way, as opposed to swing for the fences from day one with an expensive set of golf clubs that maybe aren't properly suited, or hand-me-downs, Buck, as you had mentioned earlier. Hand-me-downs might be great for for some, just to kind of get a feel whether they're going to like the game or not, and then make an investment. But I think you're better to get out and be properly fitted with your own set. Pete, any final thoughts on fitting as well, or do you pretty much concur with the other two gentlemen?
No, I totally agree with both of them, but I've always put it like this. To me, club fitting is a lot like bowling. If the thumb and finger holes fit, you can bowl your best. If they don't fit, you can still bowl, but it's more difficult. So the better the clubs fit, the better you can play. There's no question about it. So there's great outfits today. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, Pete, I wanted you, because I had this discussion. What do we feel as golf professionals that the manufacturers have done to the state of club fitting as a whole? Because you guys know, and I know, that most manufacturers change their equipment far too often. So the average Joe that thinks that they can buy a better game goes out and spends $450 plus on a driver to hit it further or straighter or both, hopefully, finds out in 6 months the same company comes out with something better. And there's a fallacy out there that, and that's where I get into the myths and misunderstandings of golf instruction as a whole, that because I think that club fitting is a part of that we allow ourselves to be foot-printed into this mindset that we can buy a better game. I don't get it.
Me neither.
Well, I agree with you there, Buck. You and I've had the conversations that, the lie angles of the irons are too upright. I said that way back when, 20 years ago, when they started doing that. I said, you're doing a huge disservice to the masses by making the lie angle so upright. I mean, you're just ruining what they're trying to do. So, yeah, they can make it so it's a little bit more difficult.
Well, and I think also, too, guys. Yeah,
I'm sorry.
I think that I would rather see somebody. No, that's okay. I'd rather see somebody spend $300 or $400 in learning how to play the game and get out and have some fun, and then, as I said a moment ago, maybe reward themselves a little further down the road when they become a better player, and as a way of again rewarding themselves. I think, to answer, Buck, what you just said, and not understanding, I think it's what we would call effective marketing. I think that these companies have marketed very effectively an idea to the average consumer out there that you can buy your game. And the truth of the matter is you can't, with the exception of going out and getting some good, solid golf instruction. there you could buy a game. But again, there's a certain amount of individual talent that has to come into it. Not everybody's designed or able to play out on the PGA or LPGA or whatever of the many tours that are out there. But everybody can go out and have a good time and have some fun and enjoy the game. And one thing that we didn't really get into here tonight, and that is from the player standpoint or the student standpoint, is we have to assess the level of commitment. Certainly we want to increase our lesson plan, and we want more students coming out and growing the game, but we have to make sure that they're willing to make a commitment on their part, not just a financial commitment of taking lessons, but a commitment of getting out and practicing and working on some of the fundamentals and some of the areas of the game that we're introducing them to. Because if they're not willing to do that, then they're just throwing money out the window. And I think that's, again, why a lot of them, going to your point again, Buck, why a lot of them have bought into this myth that I can go out and buy the game, because they don't want to put the time and effort in. But heck, if I can spend $300-400 on this new piece of equipment, maybe I can alleviate some of those issues I'm having out in the golf course. And the truth of the matter is, it's not going to happen because they're not getting to the root cause of what the problem is to begin with. They're just throwing a Band-Aid onto it, and sometimes making it worse. So, guys, great discussion tonight. Very interesting, and I enjoyed it listening to each perspective. And obviously, I know you guys agree a lot. You have conversations off air amongst yourselves, and obviously know what you're doing. And I think the exchange of ideas is important in this industry. I think it's listening to one another and exchanging ideas and learning from one another. I think that's going to help to truly grow this game. I'm going to give each of you just a moment or two, if you will. And Pete, I'm going to let you go last. But James, if you want to go first, tell the folks that are listening if they want to reach out and communicate with you, maybe if you can help them with their game, how they can go about doing that, if you've got a website or email or whatever it is that you want to do. Buck, and then Pete, I'll let you close it out.
Yes, thank you, Ted. My website is jameskylegolfacademy.com, and I am located in Oldsmar, Florida, at a private club called Eastlake Woodlands. And even though it's private, I do coach non-members, and we have a great facility down there. Thank you very much.
Thank you again,
Perfect.
Ted. I think it's great dialogue with you guys. I've enjoyed the conversation. I always learn listening to Pete and James. We enjoy our private messaging often on Facebook, so appreciate that. How to get in touch with me is Buck Mears Golf. I'm at Escondido Golf and Lake Club in Horseshoe Bay, Texas. We've got a great facility. We have a lot of technology. I know you don't want to hear all that, but I don't always use it, but it's available. And a great track. It's a great Fazio golf course. I have players and students that come from all over the country, I'm sure, as Pete and James do, and enjoying my learning as I get older with my kids and my grandkids. So, that's been a great focus.
Perfect. And Pete, last but not least, how can the folks reach out to you for those that are tuning into the program?
They can get to me at plainsimplegolf.com. That's PLANE for the plain, plainsimplegolf.com. All my information's out there, and they can look through the different various programs that I use. And I'm at the quarry at Crystal Springs is where I do my face-to-face instruction, and I do quite a bit of instruction online. So anyone, anywhere in the world, you can get a hold of me, and we can go to work. So there's a lot. It's a big part of what I do is online instruction. So, and you can learn a lot from a video. The cameras are good, and if you know what you're looking for and you know cause and effect, it's a huge advantage when you're looking at 2D videos. So don't hesitate to contact me and send those videos, and we'll get to work.
Perfect. Well, guys, again, I want to thank you. And James and Buck, just as a side note, I mentioned this, James, when we were first off air to you, but Buck, I'm going to extend this as well. I would love to have you guys come back on independently. You each have some specific areas that you might want to talk about, independent of what we talked about tonight. So I'd like to send an invitation. I will send an email to Pete, and he can forward it on. But for you guys to come on as my guest at another date, and we'll work on that and work you into the schedule. But loved having all of you guys on tonight, and I appreciate you giving of your time. And I look forward to continuing this conversation again. And also, if you guys, James and Buck, if you want to throw your hat sometime on the Coach's Corner panel, we have that usually every Thursday. I forwent it tonight, but usually we have that every Thursday before my guest interviews. But if you guys are interested in maybe jumping in on a few of those throughout the year, I can send you a copy of the schedule of that as well, and you can fit that in when it's fun. And we always have as Pete will attest to, we always have a good time on the Coach's Corner panel discussion. So always try to help the students out there. But guys, thank you very much. Yeah, thank you very much for coming on.
Yeah.
And obviously I wanted the chance to talk to you before. So happy 4th of July, and have a great weekend, guys. Enjoy the holiday weekend, and I look forward to having you come back here on Golf Talk Live.
Sounds good.
Thanks, Ted. Thanks, guys. Good job.
All right, thanks, guys.
Good night. Thanks. All right, good night.
All right, that was my very special guests, Pete Buchanan and James Kyle and Buck Myers, all great professionals here on Golf Talk Live tonight. We're talking about the state of the golf profession today, and just some of the different topics that we talked about tonight I think are important, and hopefully those of you not only in the industry but also those of you not might have picked up some valuable information as well, from club fitting to the mental side of the game, and just some of the things that you need to be looking for. We want you to come out and have a good time. We want you to get out there and be engaged in the game. It is truly a game for a lifetime, and I think that once you get out there and get your feet wet a little bit, for those of you who have never played the game before, I think you'll be surprised at how much you'll enjoy it. But again, I want to thank my very special guests, Pete Buchanan, James Kyle, and Buck Myers for joining me tonight on Golf Talk Live. Great discussion, guys. And most importantly, of course, I want to take this opportunity to thank all of my listeners worldwide for faithfully tuning in to Golf Talk Live each and every week. As I said, I get a great amount of pleasure and enjoyment of having a number of highly talented coaches, teaching professionals, authors, and entrepreneurs stop by, and it's really through their participation and guest appearances that have helped to make Golf Talk Live a first-class show. In addition, I want to thank some of the sponsors and supporters of the show, Mr. Jonathan Laird from South Coast Golf Guide. Go to southcoastgolfguide.com, and you can get a copy of that guide. Jonathan will be more than happy to send one out to you. Or if you're going to be down here in the southeastern part of the United States, from Texas all the way over here to the northwest part of Florida, you can go into most of your golf pro shops or Edwin Watts golf shops and some of the other pro shops along the way and get a copy of the guide. They're in most of them there, so you can search through. But if not, you can go to southcoastgolfguide.com and get your hot little hands on a copy of the guide. A lot of great golf courses in the area are listed in that guide, and all the important information, as well as some golf products as well. Meredith Kirk out in South Carolina, thank you very much, Meredith, for all of your continued support. A great teacher professional, LPGA teacher professional in the South Myrtle Beach area. Nikki and Tiffany Litherland, thank you very much for your continued support, spreading the word. Mr. Bernie Pinder from OnticGolf.com, great line of customized putters. Thanks, Bernie, for all of your continued support. Sean Kelly, owner of LinkedGolfers.com, and Mr. Peter Doyle from Doyle Golf Solutions over in Ireland. Thanks, guys, for your continued support of the show. And on that note, I will be back here next week here on Golf Talk Live next Thursday from 6 to 8 p.m. Central here on Golf Talk Live. And I look forward to having you join me again for some interesting conversation next week. Thanks, everybody. Happy 4th of July, and God bless.